Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn. Ben Shalom come out recently and said if Conor Benn can get his license reinstated, that fight is on. Firstly, do you think it's a fight that needs to happen?
It's an interesting one, this, isn't it? Because if he does get his license back, and I'm glad that Eubank has said that he needs to get his British Boxing Board of Control license back. If he does get that back, I mean, he gave it up himself in the first place, didn't he? But if he was to reapply it and be granted it, then that would mean presumably, well, not presumably, that would mean that the board had moved on from this situation and that they felt that the time he has served is enough and that it's legitimate for him to now box again. And they are strict. We still have very, very few facts available to us in this situation. Really, the only ones we have still are that he returned two positive tests. Outside of that, we still don't really know anything because the information that Team Ben have that they say clears him of any wrongdoing, we haven't seen. And we need to see it. And I understand, Frank Smith got lampooned, didn't he, when he made those ill-advised comments about builders and stuff. But and I didn't agree with him because I feel like people who follow the sport closely and the sport in general, for transparency, we do need to see what this evidence is, what this argument is, what this testimony is. I feel like we do need to see it. But I did understand what he meant, whereby, well, surely if the experts are saying it's fine, then shouldn't we just be a bit more accepting of that? I understood that kind of plank of the argument, but I really do feel like we do need to see it because we've been hearing for so long protestations of innocence, and never has he taken the route of basically just saying, "Oh, actually, okay, you know what, I did do it," and then trying to take a backdated ban, in which case he probably would have been cleared to box, or maybe would have been cleared to box a while ago. He's never done that, and I do feel like that's quite telling. But we do need to. We need just the books to be opened, basically. I think in this situation, should he get that license back though, then the fight is legitimate. It's it just is, whether people like it or not, whether we have seen all of that stuff by that point or not, and whether it needs to happen or not. I don't know if I describe it as needing to happen, but it's definitely going to. I think we all knew that, didn't we? I can't quite make my mind up as to how big it will be because you can argue that it'll be bigger because of the 2 years and what's happened in the meantime. Or you could argue that it won't be as big because of what has happened. People might just not really have the appetite for it because I don't necessarily believe the idea that all publicity is good publicity. I've never quite bought into that. I completely understand what people mean by it, but I don't necessarily think it's true. And in terms of it being a stadium fight or a Wembley Stadium fight, I just don't see that. I still think it'd be big and it would do good business on box office, but I don't I don't see it selling out like Wembley Stadium or a big stadium myself. Other people maybe do. Well, I mean, some people definitely do, but you know, a lot of them are in a position where they would say that because they're going to be the ones who are going to try and sell it. But Eubank didn't look great in his last fight. Ben hasn't looked great in the couple of fights he's had in America. So it does look like it does look like it might be pretty evenly matched actually.
You mentioned, obviously, we need to know a bit of the ins and outs and a little bit more behind these tests and the ins and outs of Conor Benn's ban. If we don't find this out as fans, do you think that's going to forever be a dark shadow that lingers over Conor?
Yeah, probably. And if we don't get it, I think that might affect how the fight sells because it was the NADP, wasn't it, that came out, or the statement was about them, and they've said that, as far as they're concerned, he should be allowed to box. basically. The wording of the statements was careful, and I haven't got it in front of me here, so I'm not going to kind of be too forensic about it. If he has information and evidence that, well, he clearly does have information and evidence that has led them to that conclusion, why wouldn't he want us to see that? Is there a legal reason why he can't show it yet? Maybe these are all things again that I don't. I'll admit I don't know because I've just been waiting for something concrete to happen with this case for such a long time now. I mean, there's no absolutely no reason on earth, is there, that he wouldn't want people to see the reasoning that has led the NADP to decide that he should be cleared to box because it can only be good for him, can't it? I mean, can't it? It just
Does it
surely.
does it speak volumes that at the time of recording this, the British Border Control haven't come out with a official statement yet? They've sort of said we're reviewing it and we'll sort of a statement to follow, but does it speak volumes that they've not come out and either backed him or gone against him one way or the other?
Well, they've just been very careful all the way through, haven't they? And they clearly want to see. They want to see it all, and they will get to see it all. We don't necessarily have the right to see it all, but they do. I would imagine. So they just want to take their time, and they're right to because this has been going on a really long time now. There's no need to rush anything now. Nobody will want that because it seems to me, and from kind of whispers I've heard, not from anyone who would definitively know, but there just seems to be a bit of a consensus within the sport that he'll be okay to box on a British license early next year. That's what people seem to think. And let's say he ended up boxing in March, for argument's sake, that would be what 2 years and 5 months after the positive test. It would be well more than that. I mean, it'd be 2 years and like 8 or 9 months or something like that. So that's a really long time. That's a really long time. And it'd be I can't remember when his last fight in the UK was, but that'd be almost 3 years, wouldn't it? Probably. And whichever way you look at it, however satisfied or dissatisfied people might be with how we'd ended up getting there, no one gets that kind of ban, do they? Apart from Liam Cameron, who got 4 years for recreational drugs, which will forever remain mind blowing. But outside of that, here, USA, anywhere, no one gets that kind of ban.
Just very finally, last question, Andy. You mentioned it's quite an evenly matched fight, you believe. Does the weight play a part? Because Eubank seems to be very dry at 160 now. He seems to struggle to make that and cut down. Connor's obviously fought 147. Can Connor go up to super middle? Does Eubank have to try and cut down to middleweight again? Does that play a big factor in the outcome of a fight if it happens?
I think that is an interesting one because the first time around we were wondering whether, was Ben big enough basically, and Eubank had to boil down to 157, didn't he? Which for reasons known only to him, he decided to do anyway, even though the fight wasn't going ahead. This time, there's no way he'd agree to that. I think he will feel that negotiating wise, he will have the power because he will feel that Ben desperately needs this, whereas he could live without it. And he'll want to try and dictate terms. So maybe he'll now even want to get it a bit above 160 because maybe making 160 is a bit too hard for him now. And Ben is kind of what's he weighed his last couple? Has he been at super welter for one of them? These fights that he's had in the States, I think he has been up around there. So I think he would be totally happy to have it at 160 because he will feel, well, I mean, I probably don't quite feel that out, but I know it's hard for him. So for Eubank, it might be a question of can I get him to agree to a fight where it's more like 164 or something like that. If you're Conor Benn, you would be saying no. Like I'm already coming up to 160. And that's fair because yeah, it's hard for you to make 160, but I'm not a 160 fighter and we all know it. So that's a kind of level playing field, isn't it? But then again, if you're you don't want a level playing field, do you? If you're negotiating on somebody's behalf, or you're the fighter, particularly in a situation like this, you want it in your favor if you can get it in your favor. It's as simple as that. That's you know particularly in these kinds of fights where there's not going to be any sanctioning bodies involved. There's not going to be anyone there to kind of say, well, you can't do this or you can't do that. That they all decide what it is that they do. So yeah, the weight, if it happens, the kind of contractual side of it will be interesting.
Absolutely. Andy, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure speaking to you as always.
All right, cheers, James.